What if One Punch Man came into Star Wars? A silent meteor breached Coruscant's atmosphere, ignored by planetary defenses too focused on larger threats. It struck the Undercity with surprising gentleness, merely cracking the duracrete where it landed. From the smoking crater rose a figure, bald and unassuming in a yellow jumpsuit and white cape, looking around at the endless towers and artificial canyons with mild disappointment. As onlookers backed away in fear, 3 inquisitors across the planet ceased their meditation simultaneously, disturbed by something unprecedented, not a ripple in the Force, but a void where the omnipresent energy field simply ceased to exist. What happens when a being of impossible power enters a galaxy defined by struggle? What meaning can be found when conflicts that have raged for millennia could end with a single punch? The crowd of onlookers backed away, some reaching for blasters, others simply fleeing into the shadows of the Undercity. A Rhodian information broker activated his wrist communicator, already calculating how much the various crime lords would pay for news of this strange arrival. In a galaxy where power determined everything, new players were always valuable commodities. Above, in the gleaming towers of the Imperial district, 3 inquisitors ceased their meditation simultaneously. Something had disturbed the Force, not as a ripple but as a void, a place where the omnipresent energy field simply ceased to exist. The brother, a towering figure with cybernetic enhancements where the Jedi he had hunted had taken his arms, rose first. Did you feel that? A presence, yet not a presence. The sister, whose face remained eternally hidden behind a mask of red and black, nodded. Something has entered the game, something the Force cannot touch. The third brother, youngest but perhaps most dangerous of them all, stared out toward the distant Undercity. Lord Vader must be informed. In the Undercity, Saitama took his first steps into a galaxy far, far away, unaware that his very existence represented an impossibility that would soon draw the attention of the most powerful beings in the universe. His first concern, however, was far more mundane. I wonder if they have good sales here, he said to no one in particular, walking toward the nearest neon signs, his cape billowing behind him. A Trandoshan enforcer stepped into his path, vibroblade humming. New meat pays the toll. This is Black Sun territory. Saitama blinked, expression unchanged. I don't have any money from around here. The enforcer grinned, revealing rows of pointed teeth. Then we take payment in blood. Behind the Trandoshan, 3 more enforcers appeared, each carrying weapons ranging from blasters to electro-hips. They surrounded the bald man, confident in their superiority. What happened next occurred so quickly that witnesses later disagreed on the sequence of events. The Trandoshan lunged, vibroblade aimed at Saitama's heart. There was a blur of yellow, and suddenly the enforcer was embedded in the wall 20 meters away. The vibroblade shattered. The other 3 attacked simultaneously, blaster bolts flying toward the strange visitor. Saitama moved with casual efficiency, appearing to simply step aside from the blaster fire, though he moved faster than the eye could track. With a gentle tap that looked nothing like a punch, he sent the first attacker flying into the second, both crashing through a nearby vendor's stall. The third, witnessing the fate of his companions, turned to flee but found Saitama suddenly before him. Which way to the market? Saitama asked, as if the violence had never occurred. The enforcer, trembling, pointed toward a distant archway illuminated by flickering signs in Aurebesh. Thanks, Saitama said, walking away and leaving the shaken criminal behind. News traveled quickly in the Undercity. By the time Saitama reached the bustling market district, 3 different criminal organizations had placed bounties on information about him. 2 Imperial probe droids were tracking his movements from the shadows, and a single message had been sent to Mustafar, where the Dark Lord of the Sith would soon learn of the anomaly in the Force. The marketplace was a chaotic blend of species, smells, and sounds. Vendors hawked everything from illegal tech modifications to exotic fruits from the Outer Rim. Saitama wandered aimlessly, occasionally stopping to examine unfamiliar foods with mild curiosity. You look lost, a voice said from behind him. Saitama turned to find a young woman, her face partially obscured by a hood, her stance cautious but not threatening. What he couldn't see were the twin lightsabers concealed within her cloak, or sense the force sensitivity that had allowed her to approach without alerting him. "I'm just looking for something to eat," he replied. Ahsoka Tano, former Padawan of Anakin Skywalker and now spy for the fledgling rebellion, studied the strange man before her. The force moved strangely around him, or rather, it didn't move at all. It was as if he existed in a bubble untouched by the energy field that bound the galaxy together. "You're not from around here," she said, a statement rather than a question. "No," Saitama agreed, eyeing a stand selling what appeared to be roasted lizards on sticks. "Is that any good?" Before Ahsoka could answer, the market erupted into chaos. Civilians scattered, screaming in terror as a massive form crashed through the ceiling of the Undercity Plaza. Debris rained down as a rancor, clearly drugged into a frenzy, charged into the marketplace. Its handler, a Nikto wearing the insignia of the Hutt cartel, had clearly lost control of the beast. "Run!" Ahsoka shouted, reaching for her weapons. But Saitama was already walking toward the creature, expression unchanged. The rancor, standing nearly 5 meters tall with claws that could shred durasteel, roared in mindless rage. It swung a massive arm toward Saitama, who didn't bother to dodge. The impact should have pulverized him, yet he remained unmoved, the rancor's arm stopping as if it had struck solid bedrock. "Huh," Saitama said, looking up at the creature with the first hint of interest he had shown since arriving. "You're pretty big." The rancor roared again, confused by the ineffectiveness of its attack. It raised both arms high, preparing to smash the small figure beneath it. Saitama sighed, almost disappointed. "Guess I should take care of this." He threw a punch, so casual it barely looked like an effort. There was no dramatic wind-up, no battle cry, just a simple extension of his fist. The resulting shockwave shattered windows throughout the market district. Where the rancor had stood was now only a fine red mist and scattered fragments. The punch continued beyond the creature, the pressure wave carving a perfect tunnel through 3 buildings behind it. Silence fell over the marketplace. Ahsoka stared, her force senses reeling from what she had witnessed. The rancor hadn't just been killed, it had been utterly obliterated with less effort than it would take most beings to swat an insect. In orbit above Coruscant, aboard the Star Destroyer Exactor, Darth Vader turned from the viewport, having felt the strange disturbance in the Force grow suddenly more pronounced. "Admiral," he addressed the nervous officer beside him, "prepare my shuttle. I am going to the surface." In the market, Saitama turned back to Ahsoka, who stood frozen in shock. "So," he said, "about that food." Throughout the upper levels of Coruscant, surveillance systems tracked the incident in the market district, transmitting data to various interested parties. In the Imperial Palace, Emperor Palpatine himself viewed the holographic recording of Saitama's casual destruction of the rancor, his twisted face betraying nothing of his thoughts. With a gesture, he summoned his royal guards. "Bring me everything on this individual, and alert Lord Vader that I wish to be kept informed of his investigation personally." Meanwhile, in the Undercity market, Ahsoka Tano had made a split-second decision. Whatever or whoever this bold man was, he clearly possessed power beyond anything she had encountered, power that could not be allowed to fall into Imperial hands. "Actually," she said, finding her voice, "I know a better place to eat, somewhere more private." Saitama shrugged. "Lead the way." They moved through the shadowed corridors of the Undercity, Ahsoka constantly scanning for Imperial presence while trying to make sense of her companion. The Force, which had guided her throughout her life, offered no insight into this stranger. It was not that he was shielded or hidden, but rather that he seemed to exist outside its influence entirely. "You destroyed that creature like it was nothing," she said finally, leading him down a maintenance tunnel that would avoid security checkpoints. "It wasn't very strong," Saitama replied, his face showing the same bored expression that seemed to be his default. "Not strong? A rancor can tear apart durasteel plating." "Oh." He seemed genuinely unimpressed. They emerged into a small hideout, clearly a safe house used by whatever network Ahsoka belonged to. She secured the door before turning to face him directly. "What are you?" she asked bluntly. Saitama tilted his head. "Just a guy who's a hero for fun." The absurdity of the statement against the backdrop of his demonstrated power left Ahsoka momentarily speechless. She had fought alongside Jedi Masters, had seen the power of her former master Anakin Skywalker, had even glimpsed what Darth Vader was capable of, but this was something entirely different. "Where did you come from? How did you get here?" Saitama scratched his cheek. "I'm not really sure. I was chasing a sail on genetically modified seaweed. There was this weird portal thing, and then I was falling through space. Next thing I know, I'm here." The simplicity of his explanation contradicted everything Ahsoka knew about the universe. Interdimensional travel was theoretical at best, the stuff of ancient Sith alchemy or esoteric force techniques lost to time. "You realize what you did back there will attract attention," she said, pulling out a datapad and checking security feeds. "The Empire controls this planet. They don't like things they can't understand or control." "The Empire?" Saitama asked. "The Galactic Empire. Emperor Palpatine. Darth Vader. The people who have enslaved the galaxy for the past decade." Saitama's blank expression made it clear these names meant nothing to him. "They're bad guys." Ahsoka simplified. "Oh." A pause. "Do they have strong fighters?" The question caught Ahsoka off guard. "They have armies, star destroyers, the dark side of the Force." "But are they strong?" Saitama pressed, a glimmer of interest in his eyes. Before she could answer, the building trembled. Outside, the whine of TIE fighters grew louder as they swept the district. Imperial probe droids were already combing the area, methodical in their search pattern. "We need to move," Ahsoka said. "They're looking for you." "Why?" "Because power like yours is something the Emperor would want to either control or destroy." For the first time, Saitama frowned slightly. "That gets annoying after a while." They slipped out through a hidden exit, emerging 2 levels down and several blocks away from the initial search pattern. Ahsoka moved with the practiced stealth of a veteran operative, but quickly realized Saitama made no sound when he moved, despite his casual demeanor. It wasn't conscious effort on his part, just another manifestation of his impossible physical abilities. "I need to get you off-world," Ahsoka decided aloud. "I have contacts who can help us understand how you got here and maybe how to get you back." "I'm not in a hurry," Saitama said, glancing up at a passing Imperial patrol ship, its searchlights sweeping the walkways below. It was getting boring back home anyway. The casual dismissal of his own universe struck Ahsoka as profoundly sad. What kind of existence had this man led that he could so easily abandon his entire reality? They made their way toward a private landing pad where Ahsoka had secured transportation, but as they turned the final corner, they found their path blocked. 3 Imperial Inquisitors stood waiting, their circular lightsabers already ignited, casting the corridor in crimson light. "The anomaly," the brother said, his cybernetic eyes focusing on Saitama. "Curious, the Force avoids you." "Surrender now," the sister added, "and your death will be painless." Ahsoka drew her own lightsabers, their white blades humming to life. "Run," she told Saitama. "I'll hold them off." But Saitama merely looked at the Inquisitors with mild curiosity. "Those laser swords are pretty cool." The third brother laughed, a cold sound devoid of humor. "This is the being that has the Emperor concerned? He doesn't even recognize a lightsaber." The Inquisitors attacked in perfect coordination, a practiced maneuver that had spelled doom for many Jedi survivors. The brother went high, the sister low, while the third created a flanking pressure that would normally leave no avenue of escape. Saitama disappeared. Not in the force-enhanced blur of movement that Jedi or Sith might employ, but in a display of pure physical speed that defied comprehension. One moment he stood before the advancing Inquisitors, the next he was behind them, examining one of their lightsabers with interest. Somehow, he had taken it from the third brother's hand without the dark side adept even realizing it. "How does this work?" Saitama asked, turning the deactivated hilt in his hand. The Inquisitors spun, their confidence shattered. The third brother reached out with the Force, attempting to reclaim his weapon, but it didn't budge in Saitama's grip. "The Force," the brother whispered, "it cannot affect him." Ahsoka used their moment of confusion to attack, her dual lightsabers a blur of white light as she engaged the sister. The brother moved to intercept her, while the disarmed third brother drew a secondary vibroblade. "Give that back," he snarled at Saitama. "Oh, sorry," Saitama said, and casually tossed the lightsaber back to its owner. The third brother caught it and immediately ignited the blade, lunging at Saitama with a strike that would have bisected a normal being. The lightsaber made contact with Saitama's chest, directly over his heart, and stopped. Not deflected, not absorbed, simply stopped, as if it had encountered an immovable, indestructible object. The crimson blade sputtered against Saitama's yellow jumpsuit, which showed no sign of damage. The third brother stared in disbelief, pushing harder, channeling his hatred and rage through the kyber crystal at the heart of his weapon, but to no avail. "That tickles a little," Saitama commented. He flicked a finger, a casual gesture that sent the third brother flying backward, his armor cracking as he slammed into the far wall and collapsed in an unconscious heap. Meanwhile, Ahsoka was holding her own against the remaining two Inquisitors, her unique dual-wielding style keeping them at bay, but she was gradually being forced back. These were not typical Inquisitors, but elite members of the Order, personally trained by Vader himself. "Your friend is impressive," the sister called to Ahsoka as their blades locked. "But Lord Vader will be here soon. None escape the Empire forever." "He's not my friend," Ahsoka grunted, breaking the saber lock with a force push. "I just found him." The brother launched a series of precision strikes, his cybernetically enhanced strength behind each blow. "Then you have made a grave miscalculation, Jedi." "Not a Jedi," Ahsoka corrected, deflecting his attack and countering with a slash that forced him to leap back. Saitama watched the lightsaber duel with mild interest. The speed and acrobatics were impressive by normal standards, though to him they moved as if underwater. After a few moments of observation, he shrugged and stepped forward. "This is taking too long," he said. Before either Inquisitor could react, Saitama was between them. With a gentle motion that belied its effect, he tapped each on the chest. Both Inquisitors flew backward, their lightsabers deactivating as consciousness left them. Ahsoka stared, breathing heavily from the exertion of the fight. "You could have done that at any time?" "Yeah, but you seem to be having fun," Saitama replied, already walking toward the landing pad. "Weren't we trying to leave?" Ahsoka shook her head in disbelief but followed quickly. The ship waiting for them was a modified light freighter, nondescript enough to avoid immediate Imperial interest, but fast enough to outrun pursuit if necessary. As they boarded, Ahsoka's communicator chimed with an encrypted signal. She activated it to reveal a small hologram of Bail Organa, one of the secret leaders of the rebellion. "Fulcrum." He greeted her by her codename, his expression grave. "The situation has escalated. Vader himself is en route to your location. Whatever you found, the Emperor considers it a top priority." "I found something, all right," Ahsoka replied, glancing at Saitama, who was examining the ship's interior with casual indifference. "Something impossible." The freighter broke atmosphere just as 3 Star Destroyers emerged from hyperspace, taking up blockade positions around the planet. On the bridge of the Exacta, Darth Vader sensed the departure of the vessel carrying the anomaly. The Force swirled around the ship like a storm, centered on the former Padawan he once knew as Ahsoka Tano, but the void that had disturbed his meditation remained impervious to his probing. "Lord Vader," an officer approached cautiously, "we have tracked the vessel's trajectory. They appear to be heading for the outer rim." "Deploy the fleet," Vader commanded, his mechanized breathing punctuating the silence that followed. "I want that ship." Aboard the freighter, Now safely in hyperspace, Ahsoka plotted a series of jump coordinates that would throw off any Imperial pursuit. The blue swirl of hyperspace cast strange shadows across the cockpit as she turned to face Saitama, who sat in the co-pilot's seat staring out at the light show with mild interest. "Those Inquisitors," she began. "They're trained Force users, some of the most dangerous killers in the galaxy. You took them down like they were nothing." Saitama nodded. "They weren't very strong." "What would you consider strong?" The question hung in the air as Saitama seemed to genuinely consider it for the first time. "I don't know anymore," he finally answered, and there was something in his voice, a profound emptiness that resonated with Ahsoka's Force sensitivity. "I trained until I broke my limits. Now nothing is a challenge." "The Force doesn't affect you," Ahsoka observed. "It's like you exist outside its influence." "What's the Force?" Ahsoka blinked, surprised by the fundamental nature of the question. "The Force is an energy field created by all living things. It surrounds us, penetrates us, binds the galaxy together. Those with sensitivity to it can use it to do things others would consider impossible." "Like the laser sword guys." "Lightsabers," Ahsoka corrected automatically. "And yes, Force users wield lightsabers because it requires Force sensitivity to properly control the blade." Saitama nodded, processing this information with his characteristic lack of visible reaction. "So, where are we going?" he asked after a moment. "Takodana," Ahsoka replied. "There's someone there who might be able to help us understand how you got here and what you are." The ship reverted to real space several hours later near a verdant planet covered in forests and lakes. As they descended toward the surface, Saitama pressed his face against the viewport, taking in the alien landscape with what might almost be described as childlike wonder, though his expression barely changed. "It's all so green," he commented. They landed in a clearing not far from an ancient stone castle that stood on the shore of a vast lake. As they disembarked, a diminutive figure emerged from the castle, walking toward them with the aid of an ornate cane. Maz Kanata, over 1,000 years old and wise in the ways of the Force, though not formally trained, adjusted her goggles as the newcomers approached. "Ahsoka Tano," she called out, her voice carrying despite her small stature. "You bring trouble to my doorstep again. The Empire isn't far behind," Ahsoka admitted. "But I needed your wisdom." Maz's gaze shifted to Saitama, and her eyes widened behind her goggles. "What have you brought me, child? This one does not belong here." "That's what I hoped you could tell me," Ahsoka said. "He arrived in a meteor, but he's not like anything I've encountered before." Maz circled Saitama, studying him with intense scrutiny. For his part, Saitama allowed the examination with his usual passive acceptance. "Come inside," Maz finally said. "Both of you, we have much to discuss and little time." The interior of the castle was a chaotic collection of treasures and trinkets gathered over Maz's long lifetime. Smugglers, pirates, and travelers from across the galaxy mingled in the main hall, but Maz led her guests to a private chamber filled with ancient artifacts and star charts that glowed with their own inner light. "You," she said, pointing directly at Saitama, "are a wound in the fabric of reality, a being from another universe entirely, where the rules that govern our existence do not apply." "Oh," Saitama said, as if this merely confirmed something mildly interesting rather than a cosmic revelation. "Can you help him get back?" Ahsoka asked. Maz shook her head slowly. The barriers between realities are not easily traversed. Whatever brought him here was a rare convergence, perhaps a natural phenomenon, perhaps something more deliberate. She reached into a dusty cabinet and removed a glowing crystal, deep purple with veins of gold running through its structure. "This is a Vergence crystal, formed where the Force flows so powerfully that it creates nodes in the very fabric of space-time. I have studied it for centuries, and it has shown me glimpses of other realities." The crystal pulsed as she held it towards Saitama, the golden veins brightening momentarily before dimming again. "It recognizes you as foreign," Maz observed, "but it cannot create a path home. Such power exists in the galaxy, but it is rare and often guarded by those who would misuse it. Like the Emperor, Ahsoka concluded. Among others, Maz agreed. She turned to Saitama again. You carry great power, but also great emptiness. In your world, your strength made you an anomaly. Here, you are something else entirely, a being untouched by the Force, immune to its currents and influences. Is that good? Saitama asked, genuinely curious. It means you are neither bound by the light nor tempted by the dark. Your actions are purely your own. Maz's ancient eyes narrowed. But it also means you are alone in a way few beings can comprehend. Something in her words seemed to resonate with Saitama, a flicker of recognition crossing his usually impassive face. Yeah, he said quietly. That sounds familiar. Their conversation was interrupted by a commotion from the main hall. A smuggler burst into the chamber, his expression panicked. Star destroyers, he gasped. 3 of them just appeared in orbit. They're launching landing craft. Maz turned to Ahsoka, her expression grave. The Empire moves quickly. They must want your friend very badly indeed. We need to leave, Ahsoka said, already moving toward the door. We can't bring this fight to your doorstep, Maz. Too late for that, the ancient being replied, grabbing a blaster from beneath her robes. This castle has stood for 1,000 years. It will not fall today. As they emerged into the main hall, the distant sound of Imperial shuttles and TIE fighters grew louder. The castle's occupants were arming themselves or fleeing, depending on their courage and allegiance. Saitama looked up at the ceiling, his enhanced senses already tracking the Imperial forces above. They really want to fight, huh? They want to capture or kill you, Ahsoka corrected, drawing her lightsabers. The Emperor doesn't allow power he can't control to exist freely. Outside, the first Imperial shuttles touched down in the clearing, ramps extending to disgorge squadrons of stormtroopers. TIE fighters screamed overhead, strafing the castle's outer defenses. Within minutes, the peaceful forest was transformed into a battlefield. Ahsoka and Maz organized the castle's defenders, creating a perimeter that would funnel the Imperial forces into prepared killing zones. Smugglers and pirates, normally at each other's throats, found common cause against the Empire's aggression. Stay inside, Ahsoka told Saitama as she prepared to join the defense. If Vader arrives, leave him to me. Who's Vader? Saitama asked, but Ahsoka was already gone, white lightsabers igniting as she leapt into the fray. Left alone in the castle, Saitama wandered through the now empty halls, listening to the sounds of battle outside. Blaster, fire, explosions, and the distinctive hum of lightsabers created a chaotic symphony of violence. Yet none of it seemed to concern him particularly. He found himself in a chamber filled with ancient weapons. Lightsabers of various designs hung alongside more primitive blades and projectile weapons from 100 worlds. One particular lightsaber, its hilt simple yet elegant, seemed to call to him, not through the Force, which had no hold on him, but through some more fundamental resonance. As his hand closed around it, the door to the chamber burst open. A squad of death troopers, their black armor gleaming menacingly, leveled their weapons at him. Target acquired, one announced in a mechanically filtered voice. Capture protocol initiated. Saitama looked at the lightsaber in his hand, then back at the troopers. With a shrug, he set the weapon back on its display and turned to face them fully. You guys want to fight too? The death troopers opened fire, their precision blaster shots striking Saitama directly in the chest and face. The bolts simply dissipated on contact, leaving not even a mark on his yellow jumpsuit. Huh, Saitama said, looking down at himself. That feels different from regular bullets. He took a single step forward. The death troopers continued firing, shifting to more powerful settings, deploying grenades, even switching to heavier weapons, all to no effect. Saitama walked calmly through the barrage until he stood directly before them. You should probably leave, he suggested. Instead, the lead trooper attempted to strike him with the butt of his rifle. Saitama caught the weapon with one finger, holding it immobile despite the trooper's enhanced strength. With the slightest twitch, the rifle shattered, fragments scattering across the stone floor. The troopers backed away, their training failing in the face of something so far beyond their experience. Saitama sighed, his perpetual boredom momentarily giving way to mild annoyance. With movements too quick for even the enhanced visual processors in the Death Troopers' helmets to track, he disarmed and incapacitated all 6 soldiers, leaving them in a groaning pile by the door. "Everyone here is so fragile," he muttered, stepping over them and heading toward the sounds of the main battle. Outside, the battle for Maz's castle raged. Imperial forces had established a perimeter, heavy weapons focusing on the castle's ancient walls. Defenders returned fire from fortified positions, but they were clearly outmatched by the Empire's military precision and superior numbers. Ahsoka moved like a ghost through the Imperial lines, her white lightsabers a blur as she deflected blaster fire and cut down stormtroopers with ruthless efficiency. She had long ago made peace with the necessity of lethal force against the Empire, though she took no pleasure in it. Maz commanded the defense from the castle walls, her 1,000 years of experience evident in the tactical adjustments that kept the Imperial advance at bay despite their overwhelming advantage. But both women knew it was only a matter of time before the defenders were overrun. What neither expected was the sudden silence that fell over the battlefield as a distinctive Imperial shuttle descended through the smoke. Its wings folded upward as it landed behind the Imperial lines, its ramp extending to reveal a figure in black, immediately recognizable to all present. Darth Vader had arrived. Stormtroopers parted before the Dark Lord as he strode toward the castle, his crimson lightsaber igniting with an ominous hum. The defenders' fire seemed to find every target except him, bolts deflected casually or absorbed by his outstretched hand. Ahsoka disengaged from her current skirmish and leapt to the top of the castle wall, positioning herself between Vader and the entrance. Even at this distance, she could feel the cold fury that emanated from the Sith Lord. A twisted version of the Force presence she had once known so well. "Ahsoka Tano," Vader's mechanized voice carried across the battlefield, which had fallen into an uneasy lull. "You have something that belongs to the Emperor." "He doesn't belong to anyone," Ahsoka called back, lightsabers held in her reverse grip stance. "Then you admit you harbor the anomaly." Vader continued his advance, deflecting the occasional desperate shot from the defenders. "Surrender it, and perhaps the Emperor will be merciful." "We both know there's no mercy in the Empire, Anakin." The use of his former name caused Vader to pause momentarily, his grip on his lightsaber tightening visibly. "That name no longer has any meaning for me." "It will always have meaning," Ahsoka replied, her voice carrying a sadness that transcended their current conflict. "Just as I will always remember who you were. Then your sentiment will be your downfall." Vader raised his free hand, and a massive chunk of the castle wall ripped free, hovering in the air before hurtling toward Ahsoka. She leapt aside, using the Force to deflect portions of the debris away from the defenders below. This momentary distraction was all Vader needed to close the distance, his lightsaber arcing toward her in a powerful overhead strike. Ahsoka crossed her blades to catch the blow, the impact driving her to one knee. The strength behind Vader's attack was overwhelming, enhanced by both the dark side and his cybernetic limbs. "Where is the anomaly?" Vader demanded, pressing his advantage. "Safe from you," Ahsoka gritted out, before disengaging and flipping backward to create space. They circled each other, former master and apprentice, now enemies on opposite sides of a galactic conflict. Ahsoka struck first, her dual blades testing Vader's defenses in a flurry of precise attacks. Vader parried each one, his style more restrained and powerful than the acrobatic form he had employed as Anakin Skywalker. "Your skills have improved," Vader acknowledged as he countered with a force push that Ahsoka barely deflected. "But you are still no match for the power of the dark side." Their lightsabers clashed again, the white and red blades creating a purple glow where they met. The duel intensified as both combatants drew deeper on the Force, their movements becoming almost too fast for the onlookers to follow. Inside the castle, Saitama emerged into the main hall just as a section of the ceiling collapsed, destroyed by Imperial bombardment. He casually sidestepped the falling debris and walked to the entrance, where he could observe the lightsaber duel taking place atop the wall. "Oh," he said, recognizing Ahsoka. "She's pretty good." Maz appeared beside him, her ancient eyes focused on the duel. "That is Darth Vader, the Emperor's enforcer and one of the most powerful Sith Lords in history. Ahsoka cannot defeat him alone." Saitama watched as Vader gained the upper hand, forcing Ahsoka back with a series of powerful blows. "She's losing." "Yes," Maz agreed grimly. "And when she falls, you will be the Empire's next target." Saitama considered this, his expression thoughtful for perhaps the first time since his arrival in this galaxy. "I should probably help her then." Before Maz could respond, Saitama was gone, moving with such speed that even her force-enhanced perception could barely register his departure. One moment he stood beside her, the next he appeared atop the castle wall, directly between Vader and Ahsoka. The Sith Lord froze, his lightsaber halting mid-strike as he sensed the void in the force that stood before him. Ahsoka, breathing heavily from exertion, stared in surprise at Saitama's sudden appearance. "Hey," Saitama said to Vader, casual as if greeting a neighbor, "you should stop now." Beneath his mask, Vader's scarred face contorted in confusion and rage. The force void before him represented something his decades of training had never prepared him for, a being utterly untouched by the energy field that had defined his entire existence. "What manner of creature are you?" Vader demanded, his mechanized voice betraying no emotion despite his inner turmoil. "Just a guy who's a hero for fun," Saitama replied with his standard introduction, shrugging slightly. Vader reached out with the Force, attempting to probe the strange being, to grip him, to understand him, but it was like trying to grasp smoke with a gloved hand. Nothing connected. For the first time since his transformation into the Dark Lord of the Sith, Darth Vader felt a sensation that resembled fear. "The Emperor will be most interested in your dissection," Vader stated, recovering his composure and raising his lightsaber once more. Saitama tilted his head. "That sounds painful. I'd rather not." "Your preferences are irrelevant." Vader attacked with all his considerable power, his lightsaber a crimson blur aimed directly at Saitama's neck. The blade struck its target perfectly, with enough force-enhanced strength to cut through reinforced durasteel, and stopped. The lightsaber's plasma blade sputtered against Saitama's skin, unable to penetrate even the surface. Vader stared, his respirator momentarily faltering as his concentration wavered. "That tickles," Saitama commented, looking down at the lightsaber with mild interest. With casual ease, he reached up and pinched the blade between his thumb and forefinger. The plasma, hot enough to melt most materials in the galaxy, compressed and distorted around his grip before the lightsaber sputtered and died, the kyber crystal within cracking from the impossible pressure. Vader stumbled back, truly shaken for the first time in years. He discarded the useless hilt and immediately thrust both hands forward, channeling the dark side into a force choke powerful enough to crush the throat of a rancor. Saitama didn't even notice the attempt. "Are you done?" he asked, his perpetual bored expression unchanged. "Because your army is hurting these people, and that's not very heroic." Vader, realizing the futility of his attack, switched tactics. With a gesture, he tore massive chunks of stone from the castle walls, suspending them in the air before launching them not at Saitama, but at the defenders below. "Save them if you can," he challenged. Saitama disappeared in a blur of motion. The falling debris froze in mid-air, not through the Force but through pure physical intervention as Saitama moved faster than gravity itself, positioning himself to catch each piece before it could harm anyone below. Within seconds, he had constructed a neat stack of the former castle wall at the edge of the battlefield. The display left both Imperial forces and defenders in stunned silence. Vader himself stood motionless, processing the implications of what he had witnessed. Saitama reappeared before the Sith Lord. "That wasn't very nice." For a moment, Something stirred in Vader's mechanical breathing, a hitch that might almost have been a laugh. The Emperor was right to fear you. Such power cannot be allowed to exist freely in the galaxy. I'm not really interested in your Emperor, Saitama replied. I just want a good fight. Then perhaps I can accommodate you, Vader said, reaching to his belt and removing a second lightsaber, one he rarely used, with a hilt of burnished gold and black. This belonged to a Jedi Master I killed. He too believed himself invincible. The blade that ignited was not the expected red, but a deep purple, almost black at its core. The air around it seemed to distort, reality itself warping in the presence of the modified kyber crystal within. A Sith artifact. Ahsoka gasped from behind Saitama, recognizing the dark energy that emanated from the weapon. Corrupted with ancient alchemy. Vader struck with renewed confidence, the dark lightsaber leaving a tear in reality itself as it moved. This time, when it contacted Saitama's skin, there was a reaction, a spark of energy where impossibility met impossibility. Saitama raised an eyebrow, the first genuine expression of surprise he had shown. That almost hurt. The battle resumed with new intensity. Vader wielded the dark lightsaber with all his considerable skill, each strike targeting vital areas with surgical precision. Saitama dodged most blows now, moving with such speed that he appeared to teleport around the Sith Lord, his casual demeanor giving way to something approaching interest. "You're pretty good with that," he commented after evading a particularly complex sequence of attacks. Vader did not respond verbally, channeling his rage and frustration into the dark weapon, which drank his emotions like fuel. The lightsaber began to emit a high-pitched whine, the corrupted crystal within pulsing with malevolent energy. Below, the battle had largely stopped as both Imperial forces and defenders watched the impossible duel unfold. Ahsoka stood transfixed, her force sensitivity allowing her to perceive more of Saitama's movement than most, though even she saw little more than after-images. "The crystal cannot sustain such power for long," Maz murmured, now standing beside Ahsoka. "When it fails, Vader will be vulnerable." As if hearing her words, Vader suddenly disengaged, leaping backward to create distance between himself and Saitama. The dark lightsaber now pulsed erratically, the hilt visibly deforming as the corrupted kyber crystal within approached critical instability. Vader intoned, "Then perhaps no one in this galaxy can." With a gesture of finality, he hurled the unstable lightsaber directly at Saitama. The weapon detonated in mid-air, releasing a shockwave of dark energy that tore a hole in reality itself. The fabric of space-time ripped open, creating a swirling vortex of impossible colors and dimensions. The gravitational pull was immediate and catastrophic. Debris, equipment, and even unfortunate stormtroopers were dragged toward the anomaly, vanishing into whatever lay beyond. Saitama himself stood unmoved, but his cape fluttered violently in the interdimensional wind. Vader, having anticipated the effect, had already retreated to his shuttle, which was powering up for emergency departure. Imperial forces were in full retreat, abandoning equipment and wounded in their desperation to escape. "It's a Virgins collapse," Maz shouted over the howling void. "He's torn open the boundaries between realities. It will consume everything if not stopped." Ahsoka, anchoring herself with the Force, fought her way to Saitama's side. "Can you close it?" she yelled, her voice nearly lost in the maelstrom. Saitama studied the swirling portal thoughtfully. "Maybe," he said, "but I think that's my way home." The realization struck Ahsoka with unexpected force. "You're leaving?" "I should," Saitama replied, for once completely serious. "This isn't my galaxy. And that guy with the breathing problem will just keep coming after me." "The Empire will still be here," Ahsoka argued, though she knew her words were selfish. "The rebellion needs all the help it can get." Saitama looked at her, then at the defenders who had risked their lives, then up at the Star Destroyers visible through the portal-torn sky. For a moment, something like purpose flickered in his normally empty eyes. "I can do one thing before I go," he decided. With that, He crouched slightly, his muscles tensing in genuine effort for the first time since his arrival. The ground beneath him cracked as he launched upward, a sonic boom marking his passage as he shot toward the Imperial fleet in orbit. In the cold vacuum of space, the 3 Star Destroyers maintained their blockade formation, TIE fighters patrolling in defensive screens as Vader's shuttle ascended toward the flagship. On the bridge of the Exactor, Admiral Ozzel watched the tactical display with growing concern as the anomaly on the surface expanded. "The Lord Vader's shuttle is approaching, Admiral," an officer reported. "He orders immediate retreat once he is aboard." Ozzel nodded, already calculating the jump to hyperspace that would take them safely away from whatever chaos Vader had unleashed. "Prepare to recall all fighters the moment Lord Vader's shuttle docks." "Admiral," the sensor officer interrupted, voice rising in alarm. "Something is approaching from the surface. Speed and trajectory impossible to calculate." "What do you mean, impossible?" Ozzel demanded, moving to the viewport. "Is it a missile? A ship?" "No, sir," the officer replied, genuine fear in his voice. "It appears to be a man." Before Ozzel could respond to this apparent insanity, a yellow and white blur streaked past the viewport. Alarms blared throughout the ship as something impacted the hull of the nearest Star Destroyer, the Intimidator. On the Intimidator's command bridge, panic erupted as Saitama simply walked through the reinforced viewport, the vacuum of space having no more effect on him than the lightsaber had. Stormtroopers opened fire immediately, their blaster bolts dissipating harmlessly against his yellow jumpsuit. "Your ships are hurting people below," Saitama said calmly, as if addressing a minor inconvenience rather than an Imperial capital ship. "I'm going to break them now." The bridge crew stared in horrified disbelief as this impossible being casually walked to the central command console and drove his fist straight through it. The blow continued through the deck plating, through the ship's spine, through every level until it exited the keel, leaving a perfect Saitama-sized hole from top to bottom of the mighty vessel. Systems failed catastrophically. Emergency bulkheads slammed shut as atmospheric integrity was compromised. The Star Destroyer began to list in space, its main reactor destabilizing from the structural damage. Saitama, observing the effect of his casual punch, nodded in satisfaction before leaping toward the second Star Destroyer. This time, he didn't bother with conversation, simply punching through the ship's reactor core directly. The resulting explosion would have vaporized any ordinary being, but Saitama emerged unscathed, his expression still one of mild boredom as the Imperial vessel broke apart behind him. On the Exactor, Vader had just reached the bridge when the second Star Destroyer exploded. Through the viewport, he watched as the yellow-clad figure turned toward his flagship. "Evasive action," Vader commanded, but it was far too late. Saitama landed on the Exactor's hull with precision that belied the ship's desperate maneuvers. This time, rather than punching through, he simply planted his feet and pushed. The Star Destroyer, a vessel weighing over 1,000,000 metric tons, accelerated away from the planet as if fired from a cannon, tumbling end over end into deep space. Vader braced himself against the command console as artificial gravity failed, the ship's systems unable to compensate for the impossible forces being exerted on the hull. For the second time that day, the Dark Lord of the Sith experienced something dangerously close to fear. Having dispatched the Imperial fleet, Saitama allowed himself to fall back toward Takodana, the planet's gravity asserting itself once he stopped actively resisting it. He descended through the atmosphere, creating a second meteor effect as friction heated the air around him, though he himself remained untouched by the heat. He landed precisely at the edge of the reality tear Vader had created, which had grown during his brief space excursion. The vortex now threatened to consume the entire castle and surrounding forest, its gravitational pull intensifying by the second. Ahsoka and Maz had organized an evacuation, getting the wounded to ships while the able-bodied helped salvage what they could of Maz's 1,000-year collection of artifacts. Both women turned as Saitama landed beside them. "The ships are gone," he reported simply. Ahsoka stared at him, then up at the sky where 3 Star Destroyers had been minutes before. All of them? Saitama nodded. They were in the way. The casual dismissal of such military might left Ahsoka speechless, but Maz merely cackled, her ancient eyes sparkling with delight. In 1,000 years, I have never seen anything like you, she told Saitama. Songs will be sung of this day, when the Empire's mighty fleet fell to a single punch. It was more than one punch, Saitama corrected with literal accuracy. Anyway, I should deal with that. He pointed to the reality tear, which was now beginning to emit strange energies as objects from other dimensions briefly became visible within its swirling depths. How? Ahsoka asked. Even the Force cannot mend reality itself. I'm going to jump in, Saitama said, as if this were the most obvious solution. I think it wants me. I don't belong here, so it's trying to pull me back where I came from. Maz nodded slowly. The Vergence seeks balance. Your presence here is an anomaly that the Force itself wishes to correct. Will you make it home? Ahsoka asked, surprising herself with how much she had come to care about this strange, impassive being in their brief time together. Saitama shrugged. Maybe, or maybe somewhere else. It doesn't really matter. It matters, Ahsoka insisted. Purpose matters. Even with all your power, you need something to fight for. For a moment, something flickered in Saitama's typically blank expression, a recognition of the truth in her words. In my world, I was too strong. Nothing was a challenge anymore. Everything became boring. And here? Maz prompted. Here. Saitama considered, looking around at the galaxy he had so briefly visited. Here I'm still too strong, but at least the scenery was different. The closest thing to a smile they had seen crossed his face, and that guy with the breathing problem had a cool sword. The reality tear pulsed violently, expanding suddenly and consuming another section of the forest. The defenders scattered in panic as gravitational forces intensified. It's now or never, Maz warned. The Vergence is becoming unstable. Soon not even you will be able to approach it. Saitama nodded and turned to face the swirling vortex. Ahsoka stepped forward impulsively and placed a hand on his arm. May the Force be with you, she said, using the traditional Jedi blessing despite knowing the Force had no hold on him, even if you can't feel it. Thanks for the food and the fights, Saitama replied, his version of sentimentality. To Maz, he added, sorry about your castle. The ancient being waved dismissively. I was getting tired of the decor anyway. After 1,000 years, change is welcome. With no further ceremony, Saitama walked toward the reality tear. The swirling energies reached for him, tendrils of interdimensional force wrapping around his yellow jumpsuit and white cape. For once, something in this galaxy could actually affect him, though he still moved forward under his own power rather than being dragged. At the threshold of the tier, he paused and looked back. Ahsoka and Maz stood together, surrounded by the survivors of the battle, rebels and smugglers and beings from a dozen worlds united against the tyranny of the Empire. In that moment, Saitama understood something about purpose that had eluded him in his own world. Hey, he called back to Ahsoka. That rebellion thing you mentioned. I hope you win. Before she could respond, he stepped forward into the vortex. There was a blinding flash of light, a shockwave that knocked everyone off their feet, and then silence. Where the reality tear had been was now only empty air, the laws of physics reasserting themselves as if nothing had ever disrupted them. Saitama was gone, returned to his own universe or perhaps to another one entirely, but his impact on the galaxy far, far away would not soon be forgotten. In the days that followed, rumors spread throughout the outer rim of a being who had destroyed 3 Star Destroyers with his bare hands. The Empire denied everything, of course, but the witnesses from Takodana carried their stories to 100 worlds. Hope, so long suppressed under Imperial rule, found new life in tales of the yellow-clad hero who had appeared from nowhere and vanished just as mysteriously. On distant Mustafar, in the obsidian tower where he meditated on the dark side, Darth Vader contemplated his encounter with the anomaly. The Emperor had been most displeased by the loss of 3 capital ships, but even he had fallen silent when Vader described the being's impossible abilities. For the first time, a shadow of doubt crept into the Sith Lord's certainty of the Empire's inevitable victory. And on a small rebellion base hidden on the forest moon of Yavin 4th, Ahsoka Tano recounted her adventure to the rebel leadership. Most dismissed it as exaggeration or propaganda, but a few, including Bail Organa and Mon Mothma, recognized the significance of what had occurred. If such beings exist, Mothma mused, then perhaps the Emperor is not as invincible as he believes. He exists, Ahsoka confirmed, but not in our galaxy anymore. We're on our own against the Empire. Organa smiled, his diplomatic face showing rare determination. But we know now that even star destroyers can fall. That is worth more than a fleet of ships to our cause. As night fell on Yavin 4th, Ahsoka stood alone on the ancient temple that housed the rebel base, looking up at the stars. Somewhere out there, beyond the reach of the Force itself, Saitama was probably still searching for a worthy opponent, still bored, still the strongest being in his universe. She hoped he would find what he was looking for, and perhaps, someday, she would find the strength to help free the galaxy from the Empire's grip, even without a hero who could end conflicts with a single punch. In the vastness of space, a small Imperial shuttle drifted, its systems damaged beyond repair by the catastrophic destruction of the fleet. Inside, a lone Imperial officer awakened from unconsciousness, blood trickling from a head wound as he oriented himself in the zero-gravity environment. Reaching the emergency beacon, he activated the distress signal and recorded a final message to be transmitted to Imperial Command. "This is Lieutenant Piet of the Imperial Star Destroyer Exacta. Our fleet was destroyed by an unknown entity with impossible abilities. Lord Vader survived but is missing. The being claimed to be, and I quote, just a hero for fun. May the Emperor protect us all if there are more like him." As the message transmitted into the void, a single playing card floated past the viewport, somehow having survived the destruction of the Intimidator. On its face was printed a stylized hero with a flowing cape and a single word, hero. The galaxy would not soon forget the day One Punch Man came to Star Wars.